favour of an amendment to prevent the next Prime Minister proroguing or suspending Parliament should they decide to do so to force through a no-deal Brexit. That's as numerous high-profile ministers abstain but avoid any disciplinary action from Downing Street. Well, RT UK's Shadia Edwards-Dashley has the latest. Hi there, Shadia. So bring us up to speed on today's events.
Well, of course, yesterday saw the last of the Tory leadership hustings, and with Boris Johnson looking likely to be the next leader of the Tory party and indeed the Prime Minister, all attention is now turning to proroguing or suspending Parliament. Of course, Boris Johnson has threatened that tactic in order to push through a no-deal Brexit scenario. Now, it has indeed reached a stumbling block because one of the former Attorney General Dominic Grieve's amendment has actually been pushed through, and it calls on the government to produce fortnightly reports on the state of play of the power sharing executive. The Lords did, however, beef up the bill before sending it back to the Commons, with the Labour MP Hilary Benn tabling an amendment which would prevent the full suspension of Parliament. It explicitly said that if Parliament is prorogued, then it should be brought back in the hope that MPs would take control over Brexit. The government, of course, was defeated earlier today, which saw the Commons vote in favour of the amendment by a majority of 41.
The ayes to the right, 315. The noes to the left, 274. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Now, that was despite one MP, Margot James, actually she voted against the government and therefore was put into a position where she then resigned. Other high profiles like the likes of Rory Stewart, Philip Hammond, Greg Clark and David Gauke, they all abstained from that crucial vote. And it would normally result in those MPs actually facing a disciplinary from the Prime Minister. Theresa May, though, she didn't do that. She said it was a matter for her successor. A Downing Street statement said that the Prime Minister expects her successor to take the actions into consideration when forming a new cabinet. Of course, it should be mentioned that these rebels weren't expected to get a job under Boris Johnson's government anyway, so had they have been sacked today, it wouldn't have made much difference. It would just be a week earlier than expected. But what exactly does this amendment do? Well, for a start, it doesn't exactly rule out a no-deal Brexit completely, but what it does suggest, it signifies the moves that MPs are intending to make. But it must be said, it's all uncharted waters. It's not really clear whether or not this would in fact work. We could see Parliament being recalled, but not necessarily MPs seizing control of the agenda. Not to mention, of course, that the government's default position is leaving the European Union without a deal on October the 31st. Now, putting all that Brexit drama aside, you could be forgiven for forgetting what the bill was originally intended to do. Of course, it was about the state of the devolved government, or lack of, in Northern Ireland, and that's something that the DUP brought attention to.
This bill is an outrage, Mr. Speaker. It's an outrage to common decency in Northern Ireland. It's an outrage because so far today, with the exception of my right honourable friend from North Belfast, no one has actually debated the clauses of this bill with regards to Northern Ireland, and of course the honourable member from Congleton. No one has debated the clauses of this. Instead, it has been hijacked and used as a vehicle for every other subject under the sun and every other fancy that member has.
It really is, for those of us from Northern Ireland, many of our constituents who have made this point very forcibly, very disconcerting to see the bill which is about Northern Ireland extending 2 dates to allow talks which are underway at the minute to proceed, that has all been completely, in the words of my honourable friend, hijacked for other purposes.
Amongst the various amendments which the Lord has sent us and which has now been amended here, this one has little to do with Northern Ireland and everything to do with Brexit. All the other amendments deal with important issues which are specific to Northern Ireland.
Well, one man who apparently forgot about the vote altogether was Jeremy Hunt. That's Johnson's Tory leadership rival. Apparently thought he'd been slipped for the vote, or in other words, given permission to miss it. But this wasn't the case. He actually did make it clear that he disagreed with the way in which Parliament had voted. So it does seem like Boris Johnson has suffered his first Commons defeat, and he isn't even Prime Minister yet.
Indeed. Shadia, thank you very much. Well, meanwhile, forecasts from the government's own budget watchdog suggest the UK economy would fall into recession if the country crashes out of the EU without a deal. The Office for Budget Responsibility's latest fiscal risk report predicts that government borrowing would increase under a no-deal Brexit. It also forecasts that the economy would shrink by 2% come the end of 2020, with increased uncertainty likely to deter investment in the UK. And Chancellor Philip Hammond thinks that's actually an optimistic prediction.
The report that the OBR have published this morning shows that even in the most benign version of a no-deal exit, there would be a very significant hit to the UK economy. But that most benign version is not the version that is being talked about by prominent Brexiteers. They are talking about a much harder version, which would cause much more disruption to our economy.
Well, for more on today's Commons vote and what no deal might actually mean, I'm now joined by Professor John Ryan. John, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Well, what does it all mean, this latest vote, and does it tie Boris's hands?
It ties Boris's hands, but Boris is going to have to come up with another strategy to get his no deal. And I think there are a lot of reservations out there, even among Brexiteers, that he's going to be able to deliver that. And what's waiting for him when he comes into power is also a by-election at the beginning of August, where the Conservatives might lose their seat, so his majority is even down further than it is now. And we've seen today quite a lot of people willing to rebel against him from his own party. So he's in a very sort of sticky position, and we know from past experience he's not very good at getting himself out of this.
Indeed. I'm thinking of the kipper then as we go forward. Well, it's not clear-cut, all of this, is it? I mean, to give you an example, what if Parliament fails to seize the agenda on the day that it's then recalled?
Well, I think I think when you hear from Johnson people that they can probably, the executive can override the Parliament on this and ignore the executive. I think the executive can find themselves in a nuclear option where there is a vote of no confidence in the government, which could mean that, Johnson's out. If there was a no confidence vote and he lost that, he wouldn't be Prime Minister anymore. There would be 2 weeks where they would try and form another government. And I think he's got a lot of a tangled situation here. And he's not very clear still about what he's doing, because I don't think people really trust what he's saying, for very good reason.
Well, let's also then look at the EU, because the other side of the argument there. I mean, could the EU move before it gets to all of this? I mean, offer a backstop concession before, to finally get May's deal to then go through?
No. They're not going to do anything about the backstop whatsoever. And any talk of that is just pure fantasy on the British side. And actually, it was the British who asked for the backstop, in actual fact, to try and get over a lot of the red lines that Theresa May had put up in the first place. So, the fact that the Brexiteers and the DUP don't like the backstop has a lot to do with what happened in the negotiations. But that deal is kind of dead at the moment. I don't see that moving forward at all, unless all of a sudden, Boris takes something out of the hat, and if he says, yes, well, we could try and change this, well, he'd lose 60 MPs straight off the bat from his own party, who would be completely against that, plus the DUP. So in all this scenario is October, there's problems, but there's Nigel Farage is waiting there, because that election, on the by-election on the 1st of August, we haven't heard about what the carve-up in terms of votes is at the moment. It's a Conservative-held seat. The Liberal Democrats are competitors there. Boris may find that he may lose that, but who's going to come second? Who's going to come second? The Tory party or Brexit party? Because they could lose that to the Liberal Democrats. Or will the Brexit party still show strong there? Because in the background, there is Nigel Farage as out for a lot of Brexiteers. And whether, Boris gets so desperate that he may offer an alliance with the Brexit party in a general election, because if we look at what's happening now, the Tory party is trying to get their funds, the funding for the party machine up and running, because they feel that they may have to go for an election, even though everyone denies that. Everyone says that might not happen, because the Conservative Party may take a beating in that. That's that's the line. But, you know, the Labour Party's not in a very fit state at the moment to actually make a fist of it, maybe. So they might take their chance. And we know he's a gambler by nature.
Indeed he is. And at that point we'll leave it. John Ryan, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.